let's jump into another subject. Adjustments for our reproductive health. This falls under one of the most significant physical differences. This segues nicely. Women and men is our reproductive cycle associated with scent of certain hormones, ability to bear children, which creates a significant need to adjust training pre and postpartum. Considerations must be made for training relative to those menstrual cycles and relative to menopause. Where this becomes even more unique is the incredibly broad spectrum of experiences women have managing their reproductive health. And we all have a deep, diverse knowledge base from both personal and professional experience. Alison and Maya, do you have any insights and stories?
I haven't really, I never really realized that I had any fluctuations training wise until, um, honestly, probably the last, well, because I just never really thought about it. I just would do whatever I was supposed to do on my plan. And some days I'd feel bad and sometimes I'd feel good. And I never thought anything of it. And then after having kids, it just seemed like there was a little bit, like it was a more noticeable difference. And I guess that also could coincide with getting older. So maybe it was also more noticeable. Um, and and then I just started to realize that there was a pattern to it. What do you know? That I felt good right after I started my period and I felt really strong and I could do whatever. And then about halfway through my cycle, what do you know? I felt like crap and everything was just hard and my balance was off. And don't ask me to do like touch my toes and do anything else because it was just my proprioception and everything was off. So, and then as I read more about it, I then got more interested in it and had friends who have very different experiences and athletes who have very different experiences. And it's just fascinating to see how it shifts. Um, but what's been now really fun, and I think Stacy Sims' book Roar has been a really big gift to the world. I still think it's one of the only books about reproductive health and athletics with for women to show what happens with the cycle and being able I'm working with more and more women who are wanting to train like using training in sync with the cycle, so having the recovery week during the time that they know they're not going to be feeling as great. So that's just been really fun to play around with and kind of have people who are wanting to listen, like you mentioned, Carolyn, just listen more to their body's feedback instead of looking at a metric or, having some measurable that's showing what your body is doing, and instead of just listening to what you're feeling in your body.
Okay.
Maya, how about you?
I'm going to be the most uneducated in this topic. So I'm in my early 20s for people who don't know. And due to training and birth control, I really until just recently did not get my period for the last 6 years. So I'm kind of in a different boat. I think it's cool how we're all different ages and have different life experiences. I feel like I'm very uneducated in this. I'm glad there's a book recommendation. I will order it from Amazon after this discussion. As far as coaching goes, I listen to what women say to me. Having had a male coach most of my life, it's never been a topic of conversation, was never really discussed. So I feel like I haven't had that education as far as like coach athlete goes. I always just talk to my athletes, whatever they're comfortable with, we do. I've had women athletes I've never talked about it with. I've always just had the mindset of it, like, it's kind of pissed me off, honestly. And I think that's being younger. It's just like, this is unfair. I have a period. I'm going to pretend like it doesn't exist and just train or do whatever, not pay attention to it. So I think there's other women with that mindset. I have women who don't train, during their week, during their cycle, and that's fine too. So I've sort of learned as I've gone with coaching. I think I've learned more from the coaching side than I did the athlete side, because it's just never been discussed. Even with female coaches I've had, it's just not talked about. So I definitely have a lot to learn from you two and from other women in general about this topic.
I think that's really also a really valuable perspective though, Maya. I have some clients who also don't bring it up and don't really, I actually get the sense that maybe they feel the same way, also younger athletes. And it still isn't always a comfortable conversation. And it sometimes is easier to think, and I think this is where I didn't really start thinking about it until later also, is like, it is a pain. It is nice to just ignore it and just like put your head down, do what you want to do, and yeah, and then just go that way. So I don't think, and kind of going back to kind of our overall theme of whatever you're doing is great, like do whatever you can that is gonna work best for you. And I think it can sometimes be put too much of an emphasis on too. And it doesn't necessarily need to be that way either. Carolyn, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I think, it's interesting. I think that one of the reasons the conversations don't happen is I do believe that there is an underlying oppression, a sense of, we shouldn't talk about that. We don't talk about that. Again, just being older, understanding even the issues of women's reproductive health and how it's been managed in the last 100 years doesn't necessarily make it something that we talk about, although that's changing. And I think that's valuable. You don't have to talk about it, but if there's a comfortable platform to have the conversation, then that's a lot easier. I personally, as an athlete, I was fortunate. I'm a lot like you, Alison. Always performance was highest right after I started my period, low in the middle, normal fluctuations with estrogen and progesterone. I run high statistically on testosterone, or I used to. I'm now in full menopause, which is another interesting topic for another time. But what I used to do, when I was performing, if it was training for climbing and training for a event or a climb, I would schedule my international trips around my cycle so that ideally I was climbing at the most important time. When I was working and guiding, that was always tricky because you're working. And we'll have a conversation again about this, like how do you manage all of that in a mountain environment? Doing 12, 16 hour days and dealing with menstrual flow. And I was the type that would just suck it up and deal, because sometimes you just have to, based on what your goal is. That's fine. And then other times one needs to listen. And we figure that all out. And I think we want to figure that out through science, through educating, through having that forum to talk about, so that women know their resources. And I think the other thing would be for women who are challenged even with, say, endometriosis, ovarian cysts. I mean, the list is so long, is that there is support. And you have a community, and it may be outside of the Western world, but to go ask questions.
I was also going to add another thing that I think is interesting, and this is again more my age group, and a lot of my athlete female friends have talked about just birth control and that effect on your body and all the side effects. And we're all still kind of figuring it out at this age, but there's a lot of stuff that affects performance that we take as women that I think is interesting, and just the general societal misinformation that I think reflects back to like body type, but also reproductive health. And like I personally just recently learned that, everyone kind of carries like lower stomach fat to protect their uterus. I'd never learned this. And yet there's like a societal push to like lose stomach fat. And that's really important. And just like that misinformation, I think, is on that topic of just female health in general.
Yeah, it gets me fired up. Makes me want to like start a revolution.
So I had my first experience with, the pill when I was 19, long time ago. And it wasn't good. I threw it away and refused to use hormones for birth control for my entire life. Have read books, the thing that I'm like, no way, not messing with my body. Now that doesn't mean that people shouldn't. There are clinical medical reasons where people and what it was designed for. And so researching that and knowing that before you put it in your body is invaluable.
Yeah.
As far as a revolution, you should read Jane Against the World.
Okay, got it.
I'm getting so many good books today.
It's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all kind of on.
Anyway.
I mean, I took birth control for years and years and years, and we're all kind of in this like long-term study to see what happens when you take birth control for that long. It's kind of, I don't like thinking about it.
I don't either.
But then I ended up going, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore either. So there are ways to do it without, and it's pretty cool, which also is just learning more about your body, which is also neat.
And there are clinical times it's an invaluable treatment. Some women with severe endometriosis, can't function without regular hormone support.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm very glad that we have it.
Yeah.
I am
definitely good to have, but
yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think for me, sometimes I feel like Western medicine and maybe male doctors, maybe women, about options and health. And we need to go in well educated before we make those choices, because some of the motivation for doing these things health-wise is big pharma, and not necessarily women, what's right for women. We look forward to our female uphill athlete group chats beginning in January, and greater and increased opportunity for creating connection, community support, and sharing our knowledge. And we'll look forward to more time soon.
Yeah, we hope you'll join us.